The canister was smaller than Reyes had expected. That was the first thing she noticed when Sergeant Dahl laid it on the drop seat between them. Smaller than a thermos, dull gray, stamped with a biohazard sigil that had been scratched half off by someone who either didn't care or cared too much. The Dvorga strain. 6 billion lives distilled into something she could close her fingers around. "Don't touch it," Dahl said. "I wasn't going to. You were looking at it like you were going to." She looked away. Out the porthole, the planet Veth Korath filled the frame. Ochre and bruised violet. A storm system swirling over the northern continent like a thumbprint pressed into wet clay. The Mendax Homeworld. Nobody in human space had seen it from this close and come back to describe it. That was the intelligence assessment. And intelligence assessments had a way of being technically accurate. The Tartarus shuddered. Not from turbulence. From the fact that the pilot, Corporal O.C., was threading a drop trajectory through a debris field that had, until 48 hours ago, been the Mendax orbital defense grid. Cruisers had died making that corridor. Reyes hadn't known the crews. She'd been told their names at the briefing, and had lost them immediately, the way you lost things. When your mind was already full of the weight of what came next. 6 of them, in the drop hold. Dahl, Reyes, O.C. up front in the cockpit. Private Marin, 19 years old, and constitutionally incapable of sitting still, who had been bouncing her knee for the past 4 hours. Dr. Voss, the team physician, a compact woman with gray-threaded hair and a habit of humming low fragments of something. Not quite a song, just a melodic thinking tick. The same phrase cycling over and over like a prayer she'd forgotten the words to. And Harlan. Harlan was the one strapped to the rear bulkhead in the crash harness because the medbay bunk was occupied by the nav array. Harlan had a compound fracture of the left femur, a punctured lung that Voss had reinflated twice with a field kit, and a blood pressure that was doing things blood pressure was not supposed to do. He'd taken the injury on the boarding action 2 days prior, getting them through the orbital station's access corridor, before the defense systems came back online. Nobody had asked him to go first. He'd just gone. That was Harlan. 15 minutes, O.C. called back. Dahl started running checks on his rifle. Not because anything needed checking. Everything was clean. Every component seated, every round counted. He checked it anyway. Reyes had noticed that about him. He checked things when he was afraid, so she could always tell when he was afraid. Marin stopped bouncing her knee. She pulled a photograph from her breast pocket, looked at it for 3 seconds, put it back. Reyes had never asked who was in the photograph. You didn't ask that, not before a drop. Voss was humming again, the same fragment over and over, 3 rising notes and then a fall. "What is that?" Reyes asked. Voss looked up. What you're humming?" The doctor seemed genuinely surprised to have been caught. "My mother used to sing it. I don't remember the words, just the shape of it." She shrugged, like this was a minor embarrassment. "Helps me think." The Tartarus bucked hard, once, twice, and then the porthole went dark with atmosphere and the whole hull started screaming. Crash was not a crash in the dramatic sense. It was a controlled failure. O.C. brought them in dead stick after a Mendax ground battery found the port thruster array, and he did it the way very good pilots do terrible things, with small, precise movements and a voice that stayed flat the whole time, calling altitudes and angles like he was reading a weather report. They hit a ridgeline at 200 kilometers per hour, bounced, shed the port wing, shed the landing struts, and came to rest with their nose buried in the slope of something that wasn't quite a hill and wasn't quite a cliff. Silence. Then Voss said, "Everyone do a damage check on themselves before you move." O.C. came back from the cockpit with blood on his face. Not his. He'd cut his palm on the shattered nav glass hitting the brakes. Marin had a broken finger, not a bad one. Dahl was fine, which seemed somehow unfair. Reyes had bitten through the inside of her cheek and could taste iron, but her limbs all worked, and her eyes were tracking. Harlan was conscious. That was the miracle and the problem. "I can walk," he said. "You cannot walk," Voss said. "I can walk if someone gives me a brace and something for the pain." "I can give you something for the pain," Voss said, "and then you will not be walking anywhere because you will be asleep. So, don't give me the full dose." Voss looked at him for a long moment, that humming starting again very softly, and then she opened her kit. They took stock. The crash had scattered roughly a third of their supplies across the hillside. The Dvorga canister was intact. Reyes had been holding it against her chest through the last 30 seconds of descent without quite deciding to. The terrain around them was alien in a specific way, not just unfamiliar but wrongly proportioned. The slope too shallow, the vegetation, if you could call it that, dark fibrous columns that moved without wind, too tall and too still. Like someone had done a good first draft of a landscape and not quite finished. Jek is 9 kilometers east, Dahl said. The atmospheric dispersal node. We get the canister to the node. We release the strain into the global weather system. 6 hours later, he didn't finish the sentence. 6 hours later, there are no more Mendax, Marin said. That's the mission. What do we do about Harlan? The silence that followed was the specific silence of a question nobody wanted to be the one to answer. We carry him, Reyes said. Carry him 9 kilometers across alien terrain, while the Mendax know we're here because we just crashed a ship on their front lawn, and we have 1 working rifle between 4 people, and we have the canister, and we carry him, Reyes said again, not loudly, just. Dahl looked at her. His jaw worked. He was afraid. She could tell because he'd stopped checking his rifle. Okay, he said. They built a carry frame from the wreckage in 40 minutes. Voss did the medical part, resplinting the femur with polymer from the survival kit, threading an IV line from a pack that Marin held chest-high as they walked. Osi and Dahl took the first carry rotation. Reyes walked point with the rifle. The vegetation. She started thinking of the columns as the columns, just to have a word for them, did not react to their passage. Twice in the first kilometer, she caught movement at the edges of vision. Not the columns. Something behind the columns. Dahl, she said quietly. I see it. I think we keep moving. The Mendax were not like the intelligence files had described. The intelligence files had described them as bipedal, roughly humanoid, with a neural architecture capable of projecting complex sensory illusions. False images, false sounds, false tactile sensations, over a range of perhaps 200 meters. The files had described this like a feature, like a known quantity you could plan around. The intelligence files had been written by people who had never been on Veth Karath. The first illusion hit Marin. She stopped walking and turned back the way they'd come, calling a name, not any of their names. Someone else's name, a woman's name that Reyes didn't recognize, her voice urgent and confused. Reyes caught her by the shoulder. There's no one there. She's right there, I can see her. Marin, look at me. Look at my face. She put both hands on the private's jaw and turned it. There is nothing behind us. What you're seeing is not real. Do you understand? The girl's eyes were unfocused, cycling between Reyes's face and the empty slope behind them. And then something clicked and the focus came back. She blinked. Yeah, she said, yeah. Okay. Tell me if it happens again. How do you know it wasn't real? Because if it were real, Dahl would have shot it already. That got a small involuntary sound from the private. Quite a laugh. But close, they kept moving. The second illusion hit Reyes at the 4-kilometer mark. It was subtler than Marin's. She was walking point, and she smelled her apartment. Not a dramatic smell, not a signal. Just the particular air of a Tuesday morning, coffee, and the specific dustiness of her own space. And for 3 steps she was not on an alien hillside, but standing at her kitchen window looking at the street below. She knew it was wrong. She knew, in the way you know you're dreaming when you're still dreaming. A certainty that coexists with the experience, rather than canceling it. And she felt, underneath the wrongness, the seductive pull of it. She could just stop. She could just stand in her kitchen for a minute. Just a minute. She kept walking. She counted her steps. It was something her father had told her once, when she was 12 and afraid of something she couldn't name. Count the steps, not to a destination. Just count the steps. The number mounts up and becomes a kind of ballast. The illusion faded. She was back on the hillside with the columns and the wrong-angled sky. Behind her she heard Voss humming, 3 rising notes and a fall. At the 6-kilometer mark they found the outpost. It was Mendax in construction. Low and angular, surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, doorways sized for something that moved differently than a human body, abandoned or seemingly so. Dahl cleared it in 3 minutes, signaling from room to room with hands and eyes. We rest here, he said. 30 minutes. Harlan needs the IV replaced. They settled. Ross worked on Harlan, her hands steady, that humming never stopping. Marin ate from a ration pack with the mechanical focus of someone who has been told to eat, even when they're not hungry. Osi sat against the wall and closed his eyes, not sleeping. You could tell by the way his hands stayed flat on his thighs, deliberate, controlled, managing something internally. Reyes went to the doorway and looked out. The columns moved in their windless way. The sky was the color of an old bruise. Dahl came to stand beside her. "We might not make it," he said. "I know. The canister matters more than any of us." "I know that too. If it comes to a choice, I'll make the right choice," she said. He looked at her sideways. "How do you know what the right choice is?" She thought about that. "I don't know that I do. I know that I'll make one. That might have to be enough." He was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, "I keep seeing my brother. He's been dead 8 years. But I keep seeing him out there among those things. And I know it's not him. I know." He stopped. "But I look anyway. Every time." Reyes didn't say anything. She let it sit in the air between them. "That was what you did." "The Mendax think that's a weapon," she said finally. "Making us see what we miss, isn't it?" "No." She watched the columns move. "Because we know it's not real and we look anyway. We hold both things at once. That's not weakness. I don't know what it is, but it's not weakness." They moved out at the 30-minute mark. Harlan was worse. Not critically, Voss used the word manageable, with the neutrality of someone who knew exactly how much weight that word could carry before it broke. He was running a fever. His color was wrong. When they hoisted him back onto the carry frame, he made no sound. And the absence of sound was more alarming than any sound would have been. "Going to tell me again that you can walk," Reyes said. "I can walk," he said. "Absolutely cannot. I want to be useful. You are useful. You're the reason we got through the station. You're the reason we're here. Let us carry you for 9 kilometers. 7 now," Osi said from behind. "Carry you for 7 kilometers." Harlan closed his eyes. "Ross, what? If I don't, stop. I just want to say, Harlan, I swear to God, if you finish that sentence, I will leave you here myself." He made a sound that was maybe a laugh. It cost him something. He closed his eyes and they moved. The last 2 kilometers were the Mendax, not illusions. The real thing. They came out of the landscape the way the landscape itself moved. Slowly, from multiple directions at once, low to the ground, their bodies doing something that was not walking and was not crawling, but was its own efficient third thing. Brace counted 4, then 6. The intelligence files had said they were roughly 2 meters tall, but the files had been wrong about the proportions. They were tall in the wrong places, elongated through the mid-torso, with limbs that jointed in directions that kept catching her peripheral vision off guard. She raised the rifle, and then she heard her name, full name, in her mother's voice, with the exact inflection her mother used when she was frightened. She did not stop walking. She did not turn her head. She counted steps. The voice said her name again. It was perfect. It had the exact specific texture of a sound she hadn't heard in 4 years, because her mother was dead. The Mendax had gone through her memories, like a hand, through a drawer, and come up with the most precise possible instrument of paralysis. It was, she thought distantly, impressive. It was also not going to work. She fired twice. The rifle cracked in the thin air, and one of the shapes dropped. The others stopped. This was in the files, actually. One piece of the files that had been accurate. The Mendax were not accustomed to prey that fought back after the neural disruption began. The illusions were supposed to root the target, and a rooted target did not shoot back. They had fought and won 1,000 engagements across a dozen species, and in every case the illusion had been sufficient. Something about the prey's neurology, the complete collapse of executive function under the weight of manufactured memory. It worked on everything they'd encountered. It did not work on humans. Not completely. Something in the architecture of the human brain. The way it held contradictory states simultaneously. The way it could experience grief and still navigate, loss and still walk forward, fear and still aim, produced a kind of structural interference with the Mendax projection system. The illusions landed. They were felt. They were in their way real. And the humans kept moving anyway. The Mendax in the files had noted this. The humans were anomalous. The humans were unpredictable. The humans required direct elimination rather than pacification. But the note had been written in a military report and filed, and the higher calculations had proceeded, because when you have conquered 11 species through neural dominance, you start to believe the architecture is universal. Start to believe there is no mind built to hold two truths at once. Reyes kept firing. Dahl had found a shard of hull plating in his pack and was using it as an impact weapon, which was either resourcefulness or desperation. Probably both. O.C. dropped the carry frame. Carefully, Harlan still cradled, and pulled a blade from his boot. Marin picked up a rock. It was exactly as unglamorous as it sounds. The engagement took 4 minutes and left them bruised and bleeding and shaking, standing over 3 Mendax bodies and one that had retreated back into the columns. Reyes had a gash above her ear. Dahl had 2 cracked ribs that Voss diagnosed by the way he breathed when he thought no one was listening. Sisi had a deep puncture in his left forearm that was going to need real medical attention as soon as real medical attention was available, which was not now. Harlan from the carry frame said, "Tell me what happened." "We won," Marin said. She was still holding the rock. Shh. She looked down at it and set it down very carefully, like putting down something she'd been gripping so long she'd forgotten she was holding it. The dispersal node was a tower. Not imposing, utilitarian, rising maybe 30 meters from a flat shelf of pale rock at the foot of a ridge, covered in the same light-absorbing material as the outpost. Apertures at intervals up its length. A base access panel with a lock that Reyes took 30 seconds and a multitool to convince. The inside was cool and humming with the particular low resonance of large-scale atmospheric processing, the Mendax equivalent of an HVAC system, pumping conditioned air into the global weather loop. It was, from an engineering standpoint, elegant, you had to give them that. Voss set Harlan down against the far wall. "Replace the IV pack, last one," she said. He held her wrist for a moment and she looked at him and she stopped humming. "Go," he said. She patted his hand once and stood. The canister interfaced with the node's access port after Reyes modified the connector with a piece from the crash ship's transponder array, which she'd been carrying in her left cargo pocket for the entire 9 kilometers because she'd grabbed it from the wreckage without quite knowing why. That was the thing about humans that the Mendax had not modeled. Not the fighting through the illusions. Not the shooting. Not even the carrying of a dying man across 9 kilometers of alien terrain. It was the piece of transponder in the pocket. The thing you grab, because something in you says you might need it. The accumulated small acts of irrational preparation that, across a species, across millennia, across the 10,000 times humans, had been in situations there was no way out of, had become a kind of compound interest. She connected the canister. The node's systems accepted the Devorga strain into the atmospheric loop without a sound of protest. The panel showed uptake confirmation in the Mendax script she couldn't read. But the indicator light went green, and green seemed universal. She stood back. Dahl was behind her. She heard him exhale. Not with relief exactly, something more complicated than relief. The sound a person makes when they've been carrying something for so long that setting it down doesn't feel like freedom yet. Just feels like the absence of weight. "It's done," O said. "It's done," Reyes agreed. That was when the Mendax spoke. It came through the node's communication system. A voice that was not a voice exactly. More a structured vibration that her brain assembled into something language-shaped. The way it assembled the Mendax illusions. To parse. Wet somehow with a quality of immense age. The intelligence files had mentioned the alien's speech was difficult to understand. Slurring, they'd called it. They'd been wrong again. It wasn't slurring. It was the sound of something that had never needed to compress itself into the narrow frequency of spoken words, doing so now because there was nothing else left, it said, as best as she could reconstruct it afterward. "You are the only one," she didn't answer. She held the rifle loosely. "Every species we have faced, every mind we have entered, there is a moment when we show them what they love and what they fear simultaneously. When they stop, they cannot hold both, the system fails. But you another pause. Not strategic. Something that felt like the Mendax equivalent of searching for a word. You hold it. You keep walking. We have no model for this." "No," Ray said. "I know. We thought if we showed you enough, eventually you would stop. We thought the accumulation would be sufficient. We have been fighting you for 30 years and you have not stopped. We don't stop, she said. It wasn't bravado. It was just accurate. It's not something we decided. It's just what we do. It is an anomaly, maybe. She looked at the green indicator light. It's ours. The voice went silent. She didn't know if the Mendax, whoever was speaking, wherever they were in the tower or the world or some deep node of the planetary network, was dead yet. Strain worked in hours, not instantly. There would be hours more of this planet existing, of the columns moving in their wrong-angled winds, of the light falling at its wrong angles. She thought about that. She thought about the fact that she would not be here to see the last of it, and that she was not sure how she felt about that. She was sure she didn't feel nothing. Voss was humming again. Those 3 rising notes and a fall. Standing over Harlan, who was unconscious but breathing, the motion of his chest steady and visible from across the room. Is he going to make it? Reyes asked. If we can get him evac in the next 4 hours, probably. Voss didn't look up. If we can't, she adjusted the IV line. Probably not. Then we need to find a way to signal the fleet. We don't have a transponder. We have pieces of one. Reyes reached into her cargo pocket. Transponder fragment sat in her palm, dull metal, cracked casing. We have OC from across the room. I'm not a comms engineer. No, she said. But you can fly anything, which means you understand comms well enough to improvise. Which means you can work with Voss on this while Dahl and I secure the perimeter. A silence. You've been planning that since the crash, OC said. Grab the transponder at the crash. That's not a plan, that's a guess. That's the same thing, she said, when you're us. The signal took 90 minutes to improvise and 20 minutes to boost into a frequency the fleet would recognize. Dahl and Reyes walked the perimeter 4 times during that period, and the columns moved their windless movement, and the sky did its bruised violet thing, and twice Reyes smelled her apartment and counted her steps. The illusions kept coming. The Mendax system kept running even as the strain moved through the atmospheric loops, automated and vast, and not yet aware that the thing driving it was already dying. She walked through each one. 3 rising notes and a fall, counting steps, the green light still lit on the node behind her. The fleet pickup was an extraction shuttle, piloted by someone who'd been told the mission had gone worse than expected and was visibly startled to find 5 living people and 1 critical but stable waiting for transport. The pilot kept looking at them like she was looking for the catch. You deployed the strain, she said. Confirmation on the node panel, Reyes said. You made it 9 kilometers on foot, with a... She looked at Harlan on his carry frame. With that, we left no one. The pilot didn't say anything for a moment. Then she went back to her pre-flight checks, running through them with the automatic efficiency of professional focus. Reyes watched her hands move. What's your name? The pilot asked without looking up. Rise. You're going to have to write a report. I know. It's going to be a very long report. I know. The shuttle lifted. Through the port, Vethkorath fell away. Ochre and violet. The storm system still turning over the northern continent, the dispersed Tauchors, standing at their intervals across the landscape, already seeding the upper atmosphere with something the Mendax immune system had never encountered and had no mechanism to refuse. 6 hours. Marin was asleep before they cleared the upper atmosphere. Head against the window. The photograph still in her breast pocket, her face completely slack in the way a face only goes when the body finally trusts it's safe. OC had his eyes closed again, hands flat on thighs. Dahl was checking his rifle. Voss was humming. Reyes looked at the planet until she couldn't anymore, and then she looked at the canister, now empty, still sitting in the seat beside her where she'd set it after disconnecting it from the node, some reflex making her bring it rather than leave it behind. She didn't know why. She'd know she was going to bring it the moment she'd disconnected it. The way she'd known about the transponder fragment, the Mendax had said. You are the only one, she thought about what that meant for a long time, watching the stars go flat and permanent outside the port. She thought about the double weight of knowing the truth and feeling something else entirely. About the illusion of her kitchen, real enough to smell, false enough to walk through. About Dahl looking for his dead brother in the columns and looking anyway, every time. Because that was what you did with the people you'd lost. You kept looking, even knowing. About Marin holding a rock. About Voss humming a melody she'd kept from her mother because the words were gone, and the shape remained. About Harlan, who had simply gone first when first was needed. Had not been the strongest or the fastest. Just the one who moved. The Mendax had an unbeatable weapon. They reached into a mind and showed it everything it had ever lost. Everything it feared, all at once. 11 species, that had been sufficient. 11 species, the unbearable simultaneity of grief and fear had been a wall. For humans it had been a hallway. She set the empty canister down and looked at her hands. The cut above her ear had stopped bleeding. She'd forgotten about it, sometime in the last hour. Which was not the same as it healing, but was maybe the same in the ways that mattered. She thought. We are anomalous, she thought. That is ours. The fleet cruiser appeared ahead of them. Enormous and lit, hanging in the dark the way all large things hang in the dark. Like they've always been there. Like they'll always be there. Like the dark exists to make that visible. The shuttle pilot requested docking clearance in a flat professional voice. Reyes closed her eyes. She heard 3 rising notes and a fall. She didn't know if she was hearing Voss or remembering her, or if at this point the distinction mattered. She counted steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, they came home.